All right, David Roche, great to have you back on the Singletrack Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Finn. I just love your pod so much and everything you do for the sport. So thanks. I can't wait to chat.
I think the first place we start this, we were just talking about the miracle that is Mercedes Lewis, the oldest tight end in the NFL right now. And there was something that you and Megan said on your Havalina recap pod that I want to address here at the top of the pod. Do you think, because I know that you're nervous that by forfeiting this golden ticket, it very well could be the case that you're not going back to Western states through this process likely ever again. I think I disagree. I know Megan disagrees, but that was sort of your worry on the podcast. Do you think that as the sport professionalizes, will it filter out older athletes like in this current era that are still having success? Will that become more and more an exception to the rule? Or is there something about ultra running that just until 50 or 60, you can really have a long career here?
Oh man, Finn, you're just coming in with the hardest hitting question possible. That's so nuanced. Well, first, I'm a little bit worried that Mercedes Lewis was pulled out of my ass and not in reality, but I believe 41 years old, trying to make a team right now.
Yes.
That being said, I also think he's 6'7" and immensely gifted. So yeah, I think the aging point is always so tricky to talk about. Both in coaching and athletics and stuff, because we want to say people are unlimited and all of that. But you look at other sports, football, baseball, anything explosive, and you clearly see these age curves start much earlier than people think. And the people that have bucked the age trends historically in those sports usually have things come up around them after the fact that are just weird. Running is obviously different. Endurance sports are different. And so the question just becomes, where does it all start to break down? And that becomes power, VO2 max, things like that for running. We're not going to see a 40-year-old in the 5K at the Olympics. We're not going to see a 40-year-old in the 10K at the Olympics, at the top level. And is ultra changing so much that the same pattern is going to apply? Not across the board, right? Mountain racing, pure mountain racing is different and always will be. There are a million other variables in there. But what Havalina showed me, living it and greatly exceeding what I thought was possible for my physiology on the course and still getting trucked by Will Murray. What it showed me is that it's starting to move in that direction of the more power end of sports, for at least the flatter or the more runnable races. So I think the mountain races will always be a thing unto themselves, and that'll be different. But at the very, very top end, it's just going to get more crazy, right? If that's happening in Havalina now, what are people going to be doing in 5 years? I don't know. So there'll always be people that buck the trend, but I think sometimes there's a pressure people put on themselves to age in a way that is just difficult for anyone but the outliers. And so always worth betting on being an outlier, but outliers for a reason.
So you, based on sort of that line of thinking, you could extend your career into your 40s reliably as a sports professionalizing at races like UTMB, Hard Rock, Grand Raid.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think because if you're amazing technically, really great at downhills, and pure uphills are so much based on muscular endurance rather than muscular power. Pure raw power, that you can do it. The problem becomes a lot of these races now, you're running 555 miles constantly, for hours and hours and hours, and you have to be in zone 2 heart rate to make that feasible. And if you're running 6-minute pace in zone 2 heart rate, then your ceiling, just realistically, is going to be pretty darn high. And so, depending on where you started, it's always possible for someone that started astronomically high to also do it. That's the thing, is if you're also catching someone that's just so much better than everybody else. But that was what I was thinking in the first lap of Havalina. I'm like, all right, well, if I'm at the front running this pace, and it was a huge group with us, if I'm at the front running this pace, everybody in this pack that's going to survive, if anybody survives this, including myself, will have to be I had a number in my head for a marathon, basically. You have to be. And so, that's what we start to run into, because even races like Black Canyon, obviously that's similar. Canyons, similar. The other golden ticket races I could, seek are very consolidated in that type of skill set.
I wrote down a couple of notes from your recap episode the first marathon you guys went through in 2:55, the first 50 miles in 5:47. Were you
And Will
accounting
was
for
in
that?
front of me at 50 miles. I think Will probably was like 5:45, something like that.
Okay. Were you accounting for that in the lead up to this race? What were you expecting those splits to be?
I mean, Megan is always good at predicting things, and we both settled on 12:33 as kind of the dream day. With the course record being 12:43, and it was still going to be warm. It was still 87 degrees, which isn't as bad as it could be, but hotter than historic years in the desert. So yeah, like, I did not think I could ever break that time. I thought that Havalina times would get close to 12 hours eventually, but not by athlete like me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that surprised me, like, just that it was pedal to the metal from the gun basically, and didn't let off because of what Will did.
Okay. What did the performances at Javelina this past weekend change about ultrarunning that we didn't already know based on what we've seen from your performances at Leadville, what we've seen at Western States, Canyons? Was there something novel that happened here, or was it just a continuation of this revolution?
Yeah, I think it's just more and more people are going to start just purely going for it from the gun at these races. It's always tempting to look to my own biases, but it has to be high carb, where athletes know now that you can push pretty hard from the beginning. And if you're really well trained for that, then it's just go time. Like, I mean, look what Tara Dower did, 13:31. That's just wild, right? Like, Camille's record was amazing, and Camille is one of the best ever at that sort of thing. And Tara is not like, 5K, 10K style track runner, time trialist or anything like that. Tara's just fearless and also incredible beyond belief. Like, clearly, I think she already has an argument for like that GOAT status with the AT on her resume. And she's just like, what is it? Honey Badger don't give a fuck. That's Tara Dower. She was on the edge at mile 10 from what I heard and kept going. And so the men's race was like that in like a much bigger way. And so there were tons of eggs thrown at the wall, and most broke, including my egg kind of broke. And so, but what that means more generally is, like, at the races that are more competitive, let's say, and you're just going to see big packs going out harder and harder and harder, because it's the only way to stay with it. Like, if you don't make that decision, you're just, even if you run a perfect race, it's going to be too much to give up because some of those eggs up front won't break.
You mentioned Tara Dower, and we had her on the podcast a couple of days ago. And one of the things that she said to me that I found fascinating is, well, actually, to back up a second, I just based on her presence in sport, I know she loves racing, and I know that she loves moving from race to race and just kind of seeing what she can do in between to make it all work. Is she an outlier in the sense that she can achieve such high performance without periodizing her training in the same way that someone like you would, or Jim Walmsley would, or really clearing the deck in the months leading up to a race to yield such an amazing performance?
Yeah, again, I think the fueling element has changed recovery rates too. Like, even for me, Leadville this year was my A+++ day. Havalina was 10 weeks later. That's cutting it close. But I was ready enough. I mean, it wasn't quite like that, but I think because athletes are fueling their training so well, they're bouncing back really well, and fueling the races well too. And I think sometimes the best way to train for these ultras is doing another one. So Tara is an exception for sure. Like, going from the AT to Black Canyon to this does not compute. She's special, but I do think, like, we're going to see athletes race a lot and have it be healthy, just because fueling has fully shifted how bodies are adapting and recovering. That, these big stresses that used to be pure breakdown, like, once you do enough of them, they might start to be a little bit more build-uppy, if put into the right context. Like, you have to be getting back to speed quick. Like, you can't just sit on your butt in that time. Like, that's the complicated part, is like, more rest will probably make you slow down after these races and then become kind of like the ultra version of yourself. So, I know Tara was getting back to strides and stuff pretty quickly. So that's kind of the counterintuitive part, is like, you do these races and get back to like higher power training pretty darn quickly. And then the races might themselves be put into an aerobic context, in a speed development context, that helps you, adapt to better levels long term and keep getting faster. So basically, it's like doing 5 120-mile weeks in terms of training stress.
Fascinating. Do you, and again, I'm sure there is some speculation required here, but based on what you're seeing with your athletes, what you're seeing widespread in the sport, do you get a new sense of what, for example, a year-long season schedule could look like with this new realization that proper fueling can expedite recovery, and you could maybe throw another a race or two into, like, what is now possible, do you think, from a season construction standpoint, based on these new fueling realities?
So I'll ground it in someone specific. Like, I could imagine, let's say Hans Troyer, someone that absorbs training really well, fuels incredibly, does all the little things right, and he's young and fit, as everybody knows. I could see him doing Black Canyon, Canyons, Western States, one of the UTMB, like CCC, let's say, Havalina, and then finishing it off with something in December. That type of schedule can work and be feasible, and keep building up, even in training races like 50Ks built around that.
I don't know if you've listened to this pod. Do you know Jack Burke, cyclist, how to become a pro cyclist? Is his podcast?
Oh,
have you heard that before?
Yeah, I've heard a couple of the episodes and they're awesome.
Did you listen to the Killian one by chance?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so the biggest takeaway from that episode for me, and there were many, but one thing he said was, this might be controversial. He says, I think that for endurance athletes between the ages of 18 and 24, it is virtually impossible to overtrain and overrace, provided that you're sleeping well and refueling well. That was like a bombshell to me.
Yeah. I mean, Killian, he has just been ahead of everything. Actually, Jim Walmsley's like this too. Both of them, I think Killian gets a lot more credit for like the brain brilliance side of the equation than Jim might, but Jim just doesn't talk about it that much. He's been ahead of this forever, right? Like he's been, and it's why like and I imagine if you talk to any of these athletes, they're kind of like that. And there's an amazing research article just a couple years ago that essentially argued that overtraining and underfueling are synonyms, in that it's really impossible to have overtraining without underfueling, and that underfueling is insidious, right? Like it can happen without intent. Yep. But that's the big question for those 18 to 24 athletes. Like, how can you stay fueled with that level of work, and keep it going? So, the cycling teams have nutritionists and things that are really dialing everything in. In the running space, it's becoming more common to talk about and have these conversations. And I think that's one reason that we're seeing the sport take off, is like now it's just considered a prerequisite. Like no one argues anymore with us when we talk about like the importance of, high carb during training, and then, the shake after, and then all the crap that goes into it. Like now it's just like, well, if you're not doing that, you're falling off the pace at mile 35 of Havalina,
Before we get more into your race, one more question I want to throw your way. Will Murray. Again, I've now heard you put him in the same sentence as Jim Walmsley and Vincent. Obviously, you've had experience racing all three at pivotal points in their career. What's the evidence to you that he's sort of ready to be placed in that echelon?
My God. Yeah. So for context, like I think it's always tempting to look to someone's background and say, all right, it's all linear. It all makes sense. Like it all follows some obvious physiological curve. But I think a lot of the times the best stories, especially in ultra running, don't work like that, because the people that have something truly unique and special, it doesn't fully express until they go into the fire a number of times, and then all of a sudden it clicks. And, I don't want to put too much on Will, because like, I don't know what his goals are exactly. I'm going to listen to every podcast he's on because I can't wait to hear and learn from him. But when he passed me at mile, I think it was like 43 or whatever, he did it with like a 620 mile on rolling terrain and just absolutely buried my soul. And it was so obvious to me that he was going to win that race, like that he was not coming back no matter what I did. And like when you see that as like a coach, you're just like, holy crap. And I got to talk to his coach a little bit, John Fitzgerald from CTS, in the drug testing tent after. And seems like a brilliant guy. And I just think 12:10 at Havalina is crazy. Like it's wild. It's the type of thing that you're not doing unless you have like the capability to win just about any race that has this type of challenge to it. And based on his other races, I think he's like really good in the mountains too. And he lives in altitude now. So I just think we're catching a shooting star right as it lights up. So yeah, I don't want to put anything on him again, but I'm betting on Will to be the next big star of the sport.
I mean, you had an amazing race, and I think especially the second half resilience is something to be celebrated. If you were to reflect on any mistakes made in the race, what would you have fine-tuned after? Like, what are some things you could fine-tune to maybe even chip off of 12:18?
Gosh, I think I could have been maybe a little bit more recovered coming into it. Not doing Leadville for myself, just that is a lot to ask. With the life context and kids and all that, yeah. I think maybe that would have left a little bit more time. But looking at the splits again, like I thought that would 12:18 would like not just do it. I thought 12:18 would be. If you told me that, I'd be like, oh, so I'm going to be like top 3 performance of the year again. Not you're going to be beat by over a mile. So I think I was starting to hit like close to the ceiling of my physiology on that course. Like just. There were always things that can go better in ultras. But like when you exceed your own goals by that much, I'm like, I don't know how much I could ask for. Like, yeah, I faded on loop 4, but when would I not on that course? So yeah, I think I was just, you can probably tell in my voice, like I'm a little bit shell shocked still from like, not just Will, but then Canyon right behind me, even as his coach, and Tara, and just like the understanding that, oh man, everything we thought was coming. I always say, just wait 5 years. Like I've said that probably a million times. It's like, oh, actually, it's now. It's just 5 years. We're going to be. It's like AI. When they talk about AGI coming soon, and everyone's like, oh well, who knows? It's like we're kind of in AGI right now, the version of that in ultras. And as people like figure it out, which has already started to happen, it's going to be so fun to be a fan of the sport.
I know we were just talking about, how much properly fueling can expedite things between races, but we have not talked yet about just the fact that stress is stress. You've got a lot going on in your life. I can only imagine how much you're thinking about sort of like the central nervous fatigue equation and what you can take off your plate in the weeks before the race in the key parts of the training block. Have you made any breakthroughs in that regard? Like, have you found a way that you think is sustainable to be a parent, high performance coach, high performance athlete, a writer, content creator? Like, has that equation become any more clear to you in the 3 years you've had like a bigger family?
Not at all. What I've tried to do is embrace the family part of it as training. That like everything you're doing with your kids is fatigue resistance training, essentially. The place where I was most weak, like from the very beginning of my career, I tested below every other pro style athlete we've coached in terms of our fatigue resistance or durability tests that we had always done. And then we had kids, and it's like, well, you have all this new stress. You're up in the middle of the night. You're carrying kids upstairs and all the physical stuff that goes into it. And that's also when my ultra stuff started to take off. So I think that there's benefits there. The downsides just become sleep and making it all fit. And so, yeah, I like part of the realization about Golden Ticket with Havalina is just that the parenting stuff is not going to get easier anytime soon. And it's only going to get like more difficult and more beautiful, right? Like that's the most important part of life by far. But in just a running vacuum, like, you kind of feel like every chance you get and you get to a start line, not sick in one piece, you're just like, how did this happen? I feel like Neo in the Matrix dodging bullets. And so, yeah, as Leo just turned 3, Ollie is 10 months. Like, I don't think 4 and 2 is going to be easier.
Yeah.
So no specific tricks other than Megan and I just tell each other that's your thing, and we will always prioritize it above everything else when the other person's doing it, and then trying to get as much help as we can too.
Okay. I want to talk about Canyon Woodward for a second too.
Hell yeah.
You know, we've on this podcast we have been closely monitoring his year-over-year progress at UTMB. It's been incredible. I felt like this year was a breakthrough. Obviously, he's taken a lot of pretty impressive shots on goal through the Golden Ticket Series, and amazing to see this breakthrough here. I found it interesting to compare your approach to this race versus his approach. And I guess like I'll add a little bit more context, but the question is sort of like, how does, in my opinion, different pacing in training converge on basically the same result on race day? Like if I look at what you were doing in training, I mean, 7-minute pace was like low zone 2, high zone 1 effort. Whereas I'm seeing, at least based on Strava, Canyon touch race paces way more infrequently. How do you guys get to basically the same result?
Well, Canyon's doing a lot more volume than I am. And I'm not sure if he puts all of his training on Strava, but we've really just stepped things up in a big way this year. Consciously, we had these conversations where it's like, all right, well, let's see what's possible and let's absolutely do everything we can. And he's such a hard worker and goes for it. So he's usually doing 2 workouts a week, often very big threshold sessions, some on the treadmill where he would do over an hour of threshold work uphill. He's taking less frequent rest days than I do. He's layering in longer long runs with more quality on trails. And so for him, like when you do that type of volume, you have to skew it more into like in a 3-zone model, which they use to quantify research, like tons of lower zone 1, but in a 5-zone model, like you were talking about, still like zone 1, low zone 2 has to be the bulk majority of your work. And because we're doing a lot of his stuff on trails, that ends up meaning, all right, well, you know, we don't want too much of it fast. We want the quality workouts to be really quality and not to like get too bogged down in paces and things, but the paces will come with just periodic sessions because all that really matters is the aerobic base. Whereas for me, with the time constraints, I need to make sure that I spend a little bit more time in middle to upper end of zone 2. Like a good example might be a bike. Let's say I'm going out on a bike that is 90 minutes to 2 hours. In a perfect world, if I had unlimited time, maybe that bike would be 4 hours. And in that case, I could spend more time just in zone 1. But when it's a little bit shorter, I want to spend more time in high zone 2. So the weird part about like elite athlete training is aerobic volume. Like when you start to really increase it, you need to stratify what easy actually means to having more be like actually purely easy. And then I also think Canyon is finding out like what he's truly capable of kind of all at once.
There's talent there.
Like Havalina for him, I mean, he was thinking he might be able to break 13 hours. I knew he could go faster, but I obviously did not think he would run this fast. And I think this is the moment for him as an athlete where it's like, oh, he figured it out. You know, now he's just going to come into every race thinking he's the favorite. And once that happens, all bets are off.
Yeah. And the reason I bring it up too is, again, it's something you said at the beginning of the conversation, just about how on the edge you have to be from the gun at this race for so long, like just going for it. And you have to be fast. Otherwise, you spike that heart rate. You totally mess up that glycogen equation, as you guys have talked about before. And I mean, again, I don't know anything about training, but it's been an open question for me in training how much time you have to spend at race pace for it to actually work sustainably from start to finish at the event.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of interesting answer is that it's almost like what we talked about at the beginning when it comes to aging is the velocity at aerobic threshold, which is what determines a race like Havalina, is directly linked to the velocity at lactate threshold. And so every athlete needs to kind of emphasize that. And that's what Canyon's training is really focused on. And then that itself is then connected to top end, like velocity, VO2 max, and even higher power. So But VO2 is a little bit less connected directly to velocity at aerobic threshold since you have that intermediary there. And so the big secret with Canyon is just if he had, if we sat down and did a 16-week marathon block, he'd be running a time that boggles the mind and everybody'd be like, oh my God, this all makes sense now, but it's just not what we're focusing on, what he wants to do. And I think that's actually a misconception about trails in general now that I've seen firsthand that is frustrating in some ways, is like this point that, oh, if any 212 marathoner comes over to trails, they're going to dominate or whatever. Like, no, I promise. I coach a lot of athletes that are very, very fast on the roads who don't do trails. And that's just not the way it works, because these athletes are basically that same like mold brought over to trails and just focusing on different things and get different things out of it. So some of those 212 marathoners would be freaking beasts on trails and would be some of the best. But that has nothing to do with their 212. It has to do with the type of athlete they are. 204 or whatever is a different story. Those athletes would come over and dominate. But the bulk of where athletes are, it's all kind of like finding those little edges rather than some natural, like singular ability that's going to separate them from everybody else. Maybe Tara Dower being the best example. Like, she might not, like, you can put any 230 marathoner out on Havalina and they are not running a 13:31 unless they have something like what Tara has that has nothing to do with the 230 marathon.
Yeah. I want to talk about post Western States 100 realizations for a second. We've now had you on the pod multiple times in the past few years, and I think it's interesting that like each of the years has sort of been like a tale of two cities, where something relatively traumatic has happened in the front half of the year, but then in the back half of the year, there's been sort of like glory. And it seems like that's happened year over year twice now. I mean, did you expect to improve year over year at Leadville and at Havalina, especially coming off just like maybe a rethinking period around Western?
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, it's wild. It's one of those moments in life where you kind of just distill things, like, right? Like, I say all this stuff about shooting your shot, and I think what that amounts to is not like anything about athletics. It's just you learn so much. And so for me, I learned a lot about trail running media, and not just in just putting yourself out there in general, that like what I said probably on last year's Singletrack podcast, I would not agree with now about, wearing it on your sleeve and stuff. It's like, I'm only wearing it on my sleeve now for people who invest in me in return. It is just too much to be like, I'm not the type of person that wants to be a public figure whatsoever. And so just like doing that for Western States, like it was not at all something I'd recommend to any athlete. Like, yeah, it was really good for business, I would say, in terms of swap, like, this Patreon and stuff, but probably not good for my mental health and how I loved running, nor my training approach, and the risks I thought I had to take to try to compete at that level. And then after that, I just pulled back a ton from everything. And, I'm letting, like I said, the people that invest in us, like that, I'll be totally open. But outside of that, I am wearing it a little bit closer to my vest, like showed up at Leadville, and I don't know how many people knew I was doing it, but it's a very, very small number. And yeah, it also just shows how nonlinear performance is too. It all stacks up over time. And especially in these ultras, you get one bite at the apple, and sometimes you just have a great, perfect day. And that's what Leadville was. And sometimes you absolutely shit the bed in hilarious fashion. And that's what Western States was. And then Havalina was somewhere in between. And so, I think it's beautiful because like, I definitely accept myself way more than I ever have. But it took like really kind of feeling shame in myself, not just about a result, but like feeling kind of gross for like putting it out there in a genuine way, but in a way that also made me aware of narratives and things that like were not healthy for my soul.
What are some examples of the risks that you thought you had to take in order to perform at Western?
Well, main one is just the heat training, like, level that up to take building from the research and what athletes are doing in cycling. And also Killian was doing the same thing I was, and it worked fine for him. So, seemed fine. But I think in the context of my life with stress and parenting and stuff, like, it just meant that the normal easy days, the days that would be relaxed, ended up being heat. And I just was kind of like not loving running because heat doesn't feel great, right? It feels great in moderation. But when I was pushing the limits with it and then pushing the limits with other things, it became a lot. And I think one thing I'm also seeing is the more some heat is good, but like the big heat protocols, like those in the research, I rarely see that overlap now with absolutely breakthrough performances on race days. Like, I think it's just hard in ultras where the nervous system is so taxed to go in with anything but like 100% ready to go and obliterate yourself energy. And it's hard to do that when you're doing heat. So I think heat was the big one. And then also, I just like left no stone unturned in training, and like that works if you don't have kids maybe, or you're not, in your late 30s. But like, I think that combination just meant I was doing too much, working too hard. We always uplift hard work, but like it goes the other way too. And, just showed up like sticking to the ground a little bit. Even now, like I've seen some videos from it. I never watched like the documentary, really, Unbreakable or Breakable. I mean, that Cody made. I made the title, but didn't watch it. But what I did see of the clips, like I was sticking to the ground. I looked like I was just running in a high gravity situation, running on Saturn or something. And I think a lot of that just comes back to I'd already, run my race before the race in like wearing it on my sleeve.
So is the YouTube series is that concept one and done? Like, will we not see this from you in 26 and beyond?
We're not seeing a road to anything, but we are seeing. I love YouTube as a community and channel.
Yeah.
So we're recommitting to it, but more as an extension of like what we do with the podcast and things like that, where like concepts that we love to illustrate and talk about and have fun with, but might not like this is going for a race, though. You can intuit what we're talking, why we're doing what we're doing when we talk about it. So, everything from like uphill treadmill to the Just Say No to Rhabdo downhill runs. Like, we're going to just illustrate it all in really fun ways with Cody Bear, the amazing director and videographer. Well, basically, Cody is so good and he's so talented and amazing at what he does. They're like, we need to lock Cody down because we got like an early career. This is like Michael Jordan at North Carolina, where no one knows he's the GOAT yet. I mean, maybe some do, but like he is. And if like I just need ideas for him, I just don't want those ideas to be, David is doing this race. We'll talk about the races after, both good and bad. We'll do documentaries for the shitty ones too. But before, we'll make it more about let's make this fun, educational for people, and just kind of something a little bit different.
Well, and I really do mean this in a positive way. I think that Western States YouTube series was directly responsible for a lot of entertainment value and fun hype build up to the race. And I'm sure there was a certain percentage, a strong percentage of people viewing the live stream that were there because of you. And I guess like the question I have is for anyone in the audience that is in your position, they're a pro athlete, high performing athlete, and they saw what you did last year, and within their own world, they want to replicate it in some form.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice or warning about what you should think about up front, like any trade-offs you might be making by going forth on this type of project?
Yeah, I think, well, from a pure logistics perspective, if you're going to be putting something out there, as much as you can, reduce barriers to entry. So this goes for podcasting, anything else. Like, I think people searching for perfection, that is not what you want. And so we are so lucky to have Cody. But if we didn't and we were trying to do videos, it would be, we're just putting it out there and not thinking about it too much, similar with podcasts or whatever. I just think it's so key. But from a like mental side of it or anything like that, I think, it's like keep some things to yourself, for yourself, when it comes to racing, especially. Like, you can talk about your training, what you're going for, but I think for me, anyone who knows me personally understands that like me trying to establish, like, be like, oh, this moonshot or whatever. They understand it's coming from a place of, oh, obviously I know like what other people are capable of, and think that it would be just the most miraculous thing in the world, like that 1 in 1,000 day or whatever, to have that experience. But that's not the way the internet processes things. And when you are putting yourself out there in that way and you're controlling it, it's a little bit different than like Steph Curry in basketball or whatever. He's fully insulated from like the internet if he wants to be. Like, he doesn't have to interact with it. This is still a community, and like I'm still responding to every email I get and all that. And it just became to the point that I was scared to open my email leading up to, Western States. And that was like not something I wish on any athlete. And so it's just kind of about finding where those boundaries are for you. Like, I think basically just boundaries, just slight boundaries. Maybe that's a general life thing that I should have known long before this and listened to everyone telling me. But, if you're scared to open your email or whatever, there's probably, some offset between like the type of life you want to lead in the sport and the life you're actually leading.
Okay. But recommit, so 2026, recommitting to YouTube, there will be fairly regular content there.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to have some for Havalina, then secret thing for the end of the year. And then every probably 3-ish weeks, something, and Megan's going to be involved in a much bigger way. So we're so pumped. Like the first thing I did after Leadville was like, all right, strike while the iron's hot, try to get sponsors on board so that Cody can get the money he deserves, because that man cooks. I don't know how else to describe it. It's wild. And like, maybe the biggest lesson is for any creator out there listening, that you don't have to be like an athlete at that level. Just create and go for it. Like, Cody had never done videography ever before the first video of that Western States series. And the series was his idea. Like, he's the one that pitched it to me and then to the feed. Like, if you just create, like, you'll learn on the fly. I'm sure Cody looks back at the first stuff he did and sees mistakes I would never see. But like, how good he's gotten is just, it boggles the mind. Like, a good example actually is at Havalina, where I haven't seen any of his footage from it, but we were going to the golden ticket ceremony, and I told Cody what was going to happen there. And that's a lot of pressure, right? Like, it's really weird. It's like it's tough to get the shot for it. And he comes back with this little like Instagram reel with like music over the back, literally in 20 minutes after opening his computer. That is like, I look at it and cry thinking about, like, he just captured the moment perfectly, and the relationship with Canyon perfectly. And it's like everything in life, you just kind of gotta go for it. So maybe the biggest thing is to creators out there: create, don't worry about your audience. Like, eventually there will be alignment there, but you have to go for it first.
Will the podcast go on YouTube, or will that stay audio?
That'll stay audio. Just
okay.
It's our time. I feel like we also record like basically naked. It would be,
hey, that might be great. Who knows? That might be
I
great
know, right? Do you find any benefit for yourself in putting podcasts on YouTube?
Oh, David, I think I'll say again, I think it depends on the show, but our fastest growing channel for the pod is YouTube by far.
Wow.
But I think it's really hard to grow Apple and Spotify. I think you guys do it great, but I know for us, there's just, you can predict, you can measure demand better, and then sort of orient your content around that demand a lot easier.
Does it eat into like podcast listenership, do you think?
It doesn't appear to. There just is this contingent of people I am finding that prefer to watch a video podcast. Like,
interesting.
You probably see those Instagram stories out there of like people, watching I don't know. I've just seen them like watching it in their living room, and it's not how I do it. I listen to all my podcasts, going to the grocery store or on a walk. But yeah, people like it's a cinematic experience for some people. So
cinematic, I love it.
And maybe that's not the right word, but they're watching it.
It's cinematic when like Tara Dower's on, like to every other, or at least to every other female athlete that's like interviewing the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. So it's quite cinematic. Okay, one more question on that.
I have one more follow-up for you. Here's the other cool thing. YouTube has introduced this, it's getting increasingly sophisticated, but this sort of auto dubbing feature that puts your podcast into almost every language. I am finding that people in India have now been introduced to the podcast, people in China, people in Indonesia. It's really incredible. So the reach in that way is better too.
I'll be really interested to see how our jokes come across with the YouTube auto dub function.
Yeah.
Right.
But I interrupted you. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just thinking, like, so like revenue wise, does YouTube generate any of that, or is that more sponsors for you?
Increasingly also YouTube ad revenue, because once you cross that, as you know, that 1,000 subscriber barrier, you can start monetizing, and YouTube by far has the most generous revenue share system going. I think it's like 45-55 split or something. And so we're actually getting to the point where we can make some, for example, partnership trade-offs because we have a stable source there, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. All right, you convinced me. Not sure how we're going to do it, but maybe we should try. I think people would just they probably like to see how we interact with each other during the podcast themselves, like where we're like basically hitting each other and stuff like that from across just this one mic.
Yeah, and I think also the more organic the setup, sometimes the better. Like there are vlogs that I watch that are relatively low production value, but I like them just as much as the high production ones. And I don't think you need to have this studio. Like if it is you and Megan, in your running gear at the kitchen table, I think that setting is also really interesting and organic too. So,
okay, all right, thanks, Finn. This is great. Now we're looking for different things to explore and create. Like, we have so much fun with it. Like we were talking this morning just about how much of a joy it is to work with someone that like you just trust fully, and having Megan be a part of the videos now I'm looking forward to it so much. It's going to be just a total blast. So yeah, I mean, the exciting thing for me is not my own athletics so much. It's that she's like aiming for the stars in 2026. And I can't wait for her story to be told a little bit, though she's very hesitant, especially after seeing Western States thing, to tell her story much, except like we do on the podcast only. But I'm trying to convince her. It's like, Megan, you're the one the world needs. I'm just a little pawn. You're back there with like that big queen energy.
Two more questions for you around Havalina. The first, you mentioned this in a Patreon post, but didn't elaborate. You just said electrolyte discoveries in the second half at Havalina.
Well, I don't understand. That's the weird part. Like I was taking in obviously my huge carb total, and I was doing precisions in every bottle and then Roctane on the course. And I know my sweat rate theoretically. So I was replacing my salt losses. But I had this like the same thing at Western States, this like severe sleepiness and just like every cell in your body saying stop, which a lot of people have. And one thing I've noticed after the race in talking to athletes like Coach, a lot of the people that have this more often are the intermediate muscle fiber typology athletes, often that played other sports growing up and might have been sprinters. Not sure that's connected. In that case, it might even be connected a little bit to glycogen, who knows. But at mile 70, I had just had a really poor climb. I think I lost almost my entire gap at that point across the entire race to both Will and Canyon. Like Canyon gained like 8 minutes, Will gained like 6 or 7. So, that was the weak part. Like if I'm going to go back and look at something in that point, and then we got to mile 71 or whatever, Jackass Junction, and I had just 2 electrolyte pills, just goo electrolyte pills, which I haven't taken in a long time. And then all of a sudden, 10 or 15 minutes later, was like running 630 miles again, feeling on top of the world, screaming in the desert. So I don't know. And then after that, I kept it coming and that feeling went away. So the hard part that I'm struggling with as a coach too is, yeah, we can measure athletes in a fresh state or in a fatigued state, but can we measure them in an ultra wrecked state? Like what happens at hour 8 or 9 of this? Like you can't. And so like I assumed at Western States that I over electrolyted it. In fact, maybe I had under electrolyted it, and that I didn't. So it's a shit show. Like it's so hard to figure out. Like I envy the people that are like, oh, I just go by feel and figure it out. It's like, if I went by feel and figured it out, I'd be dead at mile 30. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, I think you also mentioned this on Patreon. You said that there's interesting things that are under discussed about the drug testing experience at races like Havalina. What are some things that you can share here?
Well, I think every drug testing experience is different in the sense of the culture of like your little tent and who you have with you. Like, so for us this year at Havalina, we had the most delightful woman who was so funny and accepting and like open, and it just makes you feel like at home. I remember in 2019, I got tested after a half marathon. It took me forever to pee. And the person that was with me made me feel like I was doing everything wrong. Like, and specifically, you do a list of supplements you take or whatever, like anything. I put everything on there, so like you're putting protein powders on there, gels on there, all of that. And they pointed out like a supplement I took and was like, oh, it was like ashwagandha or whatever. And said, this looks so sketchy. And I went into like anxiety spirals for 6 weeks before those results came back. So that's one element of it. Number two, I think the big thing athletes don't talk about much is that there is a built up anxiety around it for athletes because like you understand your life is on the line and you are not in control of any part of the process. All you are in control of is peeing into a cup. And you hear horror stories on one end, and maybe those horror stories are all made up, but we know some of them aren't, right? Like Imogen Simmons just got tested positive for sexual contact with her partner and got off for that eventually. But there are many athletes who have excuses like that and don't. I understand using the word got off there is a little much. But yeah, I mean, see, there's all these stories. And then I think the main thing is like the clean athletes are the ones that experience stress and anxiety. Because they're like, well, on one side is, I'm doing everything right. On the other side is my life as I know it is over. If someone makes a mistake in a testing process, I don't trust any of this shit. Like if you're not, I trust it, but like if you're not used to it. And I think that setup without any like emotional support is really hard. Like I would wish there was some place where athletes could like talk about these things without seeming like, I'm worried about it for other reasons. I mean, the people that actually are dirty and cheating are probably not worried about this stuff at all, like even a little bit. And so, coaching athletes that go through this process every day in the out of competition testing pool, they learn over time to just not be stressed about it. But in trails, especially when athletes don't get tested quite as often, I wish there was just a little bit more open conversation about, hey, it's okay to get stressed or anxious about this experience. You're fine. We love you, but like, you can talk about it without automatically seeming like you have something to hide, because it's the people that have nothing to hide that are the ones that fear for, their futures for the 6 weeks that it takes results to come back.
And you're going to be writing about this at some point too, right? I think you mentioned on the pod with Megan that you'll do some sort of write-up around just this whole experience and some of your just thoughts on how things could be improved or made clear for the sport.
Yeah. And God, I think USADA has crushed it. Like, it's so fun to see them at these races. And, I think that just in my experiences, the times I've been tested like 3 or 4 years ago, it was so much more intense, like a cop-like experience. Like, anyone who's ever been pulled over understand, that feeling of like your heart, like it used to be like that in terms of how the environment was. And now recently it's been almost like, your most fun camp counselors that also have a really big focus on detail. I was really, really thrilled with both years at Havalina. So it's just an interesting world. And I think, the more and more testing comes to trails, the more talking about it openly would be good, just because, I think a lot of people assume an infallible system, and any athlete who's actually in the process, just part of your brain's like, well, what if it's not? Well, what if it's not? You're gonna have to like everything's done for you. And so, I try to be open about that because I have these conversations with athletes I coach all the time. But I don't think any of them would be comfortable talking about it on a podcast for that reason. So if you're out there and you go through this, like, just message me. You're fine. You have nothing to worry about, but like, it's always something that's worth, being open about feelings.
Few questions about the future before we go. Let's talk first about your quote unquote running marketability in 2026.
Oh, yeah.
So, a major trade-off of this race, giving up the golden ticket, handing it to Canyon, is it's not a sure thing that you'll be on the Western States start line. UTMB is also not in the cards. So the two races that brands care the most about in our sport are either definitely or likely out of the question for you.
Yeah.
How do you market yourself in that context? What do you still have going for you?
Yeah. I mean, the podcast and the video series are the podcast is really where it's at, right? Like,
yeah.
I think the podcast is way more valuable than me as an athlete. Maybe not Megan as an athlete. That's how good she is.
It's the biggest podcast in trail, I think, by a lot.
I mean, I don't know, but at least like the people that support us are just so cool and like understanding and invested. And also know that like, we're not going to say something that, I mean, we'll be aggressively honest even when we don't have sponsorships. Right. But on the flip side, if my earning years as an athlete are not forever, right, there are opportunities that have been presenting slightly more often recently to like cash in a little bit for things I do believe in, but also as an athlete, where companies want an athlete. And the tricky part in the conversation that Megan and I had a lot before that golden ticket presentation was just like, what's the actual trade-off financially? And the answer is, you can't know for sure, but probably somewhat significant, solely because, I mean, I understand where those brands are coming from. They want someone that's going to perform at the top level at those races. And one, I didn't this year, right? Like, I did not do good at Western States at all. I gave a lot of hugs at Forest Hill, which is never a good sign for your brand marketability. And, two, I'm probably not going to be at Western States. I'm going to go for a golden ticket at the Canyons 100K if I can. If they let me in, I'm going to, or just register the gold old fashioned way. And I'm going to try really hard to get it. But like we talked about with the sport, that's, might not happen. And we can't do UTMB with the kids right now. So yeah, you put it all together and it's like, athlete, they'd have to understand the podcast. And that's the tricky part that I'm sure you run into sometimes too. Some brands get it, especially if the people at the brand listen to the podcast and are fans. And some really, really don't. And they're like, we're not here to sign podcasters, like that's not our business. That's a different part of the company usually. We're here to sign killer athletes.
Yeah.
And, killer athletes don't give up golden tickets. Well, I mean, they might if they're Francesco Pupi, but they have other plans. And rather than, I'm going to go try for another one.
I was impressed by his both of your disciplines to focus on whatever, is interesting you in the long term. And I'm glad he's finally on the line next year. I think is he going to be exciting at Western next year. But
oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. It's wild, right? Like I think he's one of those guys too that just thinks deeply about it, understands it, and also understands his own capabilities really well. And I think when he turned down that golden ticket, one, it's he knows he's not like maybe mentally at that point yet, like he has another plan. But two, he also understands, he can just go take a golden ticket from someone like David anytime he wants. And he would never say that because he's the nicest, kindest guy. But you're talking about different level. And that tier of athlete almost doesn't have to worry about it. I would put Drew Holman in that group too, when he turned down his ticket at Canyons a couple years ago. I mean, we never even discussed this, but implicit in the decision, like going into the race, he knew he wasn't going to take it. Implicit in that decision was, if you want another one, you get another one. Like that's not, and of course now he has the CCC one. So like, yeah. Maybe other people feel as, confident in me as I feel about Drew and Francesco, but I certainly don't.
What else could you imagine doing next year if Western States isn't in the cards? What does July, August, September, October hypothetically look like?
Well, I'd love to get a hard rock qualifier because that would be the dream race, like where everything
Wow.
comes together for me physiologically. Like altitude is the one place where things are different. If
Yeah.
the golden ticket race was at altitude, I'd feel very different about this conversation. But, so you have to get a qualifier, which is so hard because a lot of the races I would normally do aren't qualifiers. So maybe something like High Lonesome or I think that's a qualifier. I hope it is. And then try to get into Hard Rock 2027, I guess, where,
Wow.
that's one of those races where I'm less worried about the aging process too. So that would be the dream. And then Leadville and Havalina the family has reservations there. It's just a question of whether Megan or I are doing each one.
Okay, cool. Season's over, or secret thing? Is the secret thing possibly not quite a season ender?
Yeah. Season's not over yet. I'm feeling good, feeling recovered after, that's actually one of the weird things about as I move through it. My recovery gets faster after each one of these. And yeah. So something is brewing, but I'm just like I talked about with the series. Like I'm not going to talk about it until I show up and do it. Be about it, don't talk about it is my new approach to this stuff. But I think people will probably, if I end up deciding to try for it, they'll know by the time I do.
See, talking about it though is the oxygen that us media people need. So
yeah, but I feel like the speculation might even be better later.
there we go.
Yeah. No, I think all the big, like, not, this probably makes it obvious, but what Javelina shows is what I suspected for a really long time, which is in the flatter you're going, the more meat there is on the bone with all of this, because high carb changes the game so much. And my extreme curiosity now is if I'm taking something where the stakes aren't at all high, right? Like I don't want to like shit the bed at Western States or Leadville or Havalina if I don't have to. But like if I truly have nothing to lose, I kind of want to see what happens in one of these types of races if you're able to get up to like triathlete carbohydrate levels in a controlled setting. And you have this optimized velocity at aerobic threshold. Like how fast could you go? Because I do think that a lot of our preconceived notions about what's possible are like, again, I'm putting the 5-year timeline on it, but it's probably just 1 or 2 years. Everything is going to get blown out of the water. So, if I'm the first one to get a little bit of a little crack at it, that's always nice because much like the 1 hour record in cycling, I think, whoever gets the initial cracks, it's not going to mean much because eventually a Jim Walmsley or a Will Murray will come along and take the next crack.
Pioneers get arrows, settlers get land, I think is the phrase.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm going to need a lower back tattoo that says that, I feel like.
David, always great chat, and thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the one thing I do want to emphasize on here that I haven't enough is like, in giving or passing down the ticket to Canyon, I think part of that too is understanding that Canyon can compete for the win at Western States and I can't. And I don't want to like put myself down, but that's just how good he is. And so it's such an honor to see him like progress through this. And I can't wait to hear more interviews with Canyon and, as he navigates this space. But the main reason I wanted to say that was my little prelude to say, if any, I know brands listen to Singletrack. This is the podcast that influences. Canyon is your guy. You can probably get him way less expensive than any other athlete that's going to has a shot to win Western States. He's the one you should sign, or at least, have a conversation with because, he is the real deal in every way. Like you're going to love him so much. So yes, we Canyon.
So he's a free agent.
I mean, I think so. I hope so,
Okay.
based on what I just said. But I mean, he's definitely not like having his life changed by his current setup. So, I think, yeah, Singletrack's been in front of the Canyon game forever. I don't know how you do it. You're also in front of Chris Meyer's game.
The backstory there is Canyon and I both worked in politics together in Maine, sort of side by side. He was working for he was the campaign manager for Chloe Maxman, who was has a great story running for state senate there. And then I was working on the ranked choice voting campaign. This was back in 2016. So I always knew of him, and he was like a fellow. We were both two politicos kind of running around in Maine. And so I've just known him for 10 years. He's a great guy.
Wow. But yeah, and also I remember you predicting everything with Chris Myers long before, it actually hit. So I just want to say, I feel like it was a Bandera a very long time ago. You said Chris Myers is the next. It might have been. I don't want to say it was whoever was the best at the time. Like you gave him such a boost, and basically, I want to say I know that you've gotten some shit on here for some of your predictions over time, but in fact, your big hits, like you are predicting things that no one else is catching. Basically, that is so. Big props to Finn.
We've been wrong about you before. I've famously predicted that Courtney wasn't going to get a golden ticket at Bandera. I've made some bad ones. But I appreciate.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're taking the 50-1 bets, you don't need to hit that many of them to make it like you're beating the books.
That's true.
The sports books hate to see Finn coming.
All right, David. Thanks so much.
We love you, Finn, and love everybody listening. Thank you, guys.